This is a SACNAS Science Video Podcast, exploring the lives and research of SACNAS scientists. I'm Cassandra Brooks. Years ago, Margaret Hiza Redsteer, project chief of the Navajo Land Use Planning Project with the United States Geological Survey, saw her community suffering from an overall lack of water. Determined to help, she went back to school and has since worked to try to understand her community's water and environmental problems, with the hope of finding a solution. She has since learned that her community's suffering is tied directly to climate change.
And what were some of the things you were seeing that inspired you to want to go into environmental science?
Just the day-to-day struggles people had trying to get a reliable water supply for drinking water, not for things just that basic. And also not knowing how reliable the water supplies were that they were using and whether they were going to get sick or not from using the water that they were drinking.
How are you actually understanding better the water problems and what's causing it?
Our perspective comes from interviewing tribal elders about the changes that they've seen in their lifetime, and then comparing that information to the data that we've collected on snowfall, on rainfall, temperature, and also old science reports on where water supplies were.
And what are some of the stories that people have told you so far?
They talk about the disappearance of different plants and animals, of bees and locusts, the disappearance of springs, and the disappearance of medicinal plants and plants that they use for food supplies, and also problems being able to grow their own crops. People have given up on farming. In the late 1800s, every Navajo family farmed, and people never even had to go to a store for food. That's how big the changes are.
How much of a decline are we talking about?
Almost 100%. We've gone from having many streams and rivers that are perennial to having one stream reach that's probably about 20 miles long down towards the confluence of the Colorado River as being the only perennial surface water feature now.
What's the main cause of this?
We think that the primary cause is decreasing snowfall, because if you have snowfall and a snowpack, that's like water in the bank. That's what supplies the streams all year long. So if you don't have a snowpack, you're not going to have sustained flow in the river systems. And the amount of snow that the region is getting is approaching zero. There are some years that are just, on the order of the total snowfall for the year is on the order of inches. So it's had a big impact on the amount of surface water available.
And is this a climate change issue?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. In fact, declining snowpack is one of the biggest indicators of climate change that we've seen across the western U.S. so far. And it's something that not just the Navajo Nation, but many other communities are going to be grappling with soon. What are you going to do when you don't have river flow all year long? And that's a really sobering thought, because there are so many ecosystems that will be really impacted by this, besides personal, like water supplies.
And so you're going out and finding out that there is less and less water. What is the potential solution?
That's a really good question. I don't really have a whole lot of solutions right now, but I think the first thing is to recognize that this is something that's happening, so that people, not just on the Navajo Nation, but in the surrounding communities, understand how endangered their water supplies are, and try to manage their water supplies more wisely.
I know that a lot of people are hearing a lot about climate change, but I feel like it's usually in the context of how it's impacting the environment and the earth, and a lot of people aren't seeing what you're seeing the day-to-day, that it's actually impacting human communities.
Well, it's actually worrisome that people are so insulated from the natural world that they believe that the birds and the bees and the butterflies are going to be hurt, but not them. And I think it's a very egotistical position for human beings to be in, to think that they're so above the natural system that it's not going to have any effect on their lives.
What still gives you hope about this? Because it sounds almost the kind of thing that'd keep you awake at night, I think.
Actually, it does keep me awake at night, but it also gets me up in the morning. And I think the reason I still have hope is because the really great thing about Native American communities is how strong the sense of community is. And if you look at any of the literature on how people manage to survive through difficult times, it's the communities that are more tightly knit and more willing to accept change and find a way to deal with it rather than ignoring it. Those are the people that survive.
People who can adapt.
People who can adapt and help each other adapt. Exactly.
With the SACNAS Science Video Podcast, I'm Cassandra Brooks.